Welcome to Frickety Frack, We Do Talk Back. Thank you for joining me in this episode. My name is Patrick, and I'm Frack. Frickety Frack, We Do Talk Back is a show where we discuss different aspects of fandom and how they relate to the gospel. So I'm going to be going through Bleach, 1,000 Year Blood War, episode by episode, and connecting it to lessons from the Bible. And so we're going to be covering an episode of Bleach 1,000 Year Blood War until the season hiatus. Now, the season hiatus has happened, but I'm going to cover one of the episodes. So next week, I'll still cover Bleach 1,000 Year Blood War. And then so after that episode, I will announce where I'm going, what new direction I'm going to go in with Frickety Frack, We Do Talk Back. And so look forward to that announcement next week. But this show was named after from my dad, who dubbed my brother and me Frick and Frack since we were kids. And so this episode that we're covering is Everything But the Rain, June Truth. So this is the 12th episode of Bleach 1,000 Year Blood War, the first part. And so in this episode, this is very much a story episode. Just as much as the episode preceding this one, this is continuing to tell the story of how Ishin and Masaki fell in love, came together. And so in this episode, that's still more focuses on the big discussion for Ishin is what I'm going to talk about in the biblical theme in just a moment, but how Ishin's presence helps keeps the hollow at bay and things like that. So like I said, I'm gonna get more into that. But the beginning of this episode, I do love. We get a small little glimpse of the bureaucracy behind the Soul Society, the Shinigamis, the Soul Reapers. It's always fascinating seeing the life in a Soul Reaper and every day. And so a captain's. So Ishin, who is a captain, is having to report to the head captain about what happened to him in the land of the living and dealing with the hollow known as White. And so now this is going to be a big spoiler if you have not seen the anime yet, or if you're not familiar with the manga. So something that you might have surmised, like I said, this is a big spoiler, is that Yawaba is in fact responsible for the death of Masaki and Katagiri. So if you remember, in the very beginning of the 1,000 Year Blood War, there was this poem. So the poem goes that Yawaba would regain his pulse after 900 years. Then he would get his mind back at 90, and then 9 years he would get his power back. And so it was on that day where we get from the very beginning of Ichigo's origin that everything centers around his mother being killed by the Grand Fisher Hollow. And so what ended up happening was that on that day was when Yawaba gained his power back, and so he took the power from all Quincy's he didn't consider pure. And so since Masaki had in fact been contaminated by White, she lost her powers, thus leading to Grand Fisher being able to kill her. Because one of the things that Ishin says about Masaki is that because he sensed her confrontation and actually thought to go help, but he's like, well, the spiritual pressure power level difference was so great that he wasn't concerned about her at all. So it wasn't that he acted cavalier towards his wife. He just knew she could win, and so that unfortunately is what led to the death of both Masaki and Katagiri. And Katagiri is Uryu's mother. And so when Yawaba took those power back, it caused their deaths. And that leads to Ichigo being willing to go back and gives him his resolve to go and get his Zanpakuto and join back up with the fight. And so this all connects to the biblical theme of John chapter 15, verse 13. This is what it says. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. So, as I stated earlier in the episode, the uh, the big surprise that in everything that happens is that Ishin gives up his Soul Reaper powers so that he can be close to Misaki and to keep her from becoming fully hollified, and so he does that. But it's funny, Urahara, who had come up with this technology, is with Ryu and Ishin, while Misaki is getting closer and closer to soul suicide, as Urahara calls it. Urahara lists off all of the negatives for Ishin to do this. And Ryu, while this is going on, Ryu's thinking in his mind, he's like, man, he's not going to do this. There's too much downside. And then after all the negative effects of this happen, Ishin says, "Yeah, I'll do it," and doesn't even hesitate. Like, and one of the best parts that I love about this is that you can see, you can see Ryu's face kind of every negative that Urahara says. Ryu is like, man, that's just one more thing. And because they're showing such detail in Ryu's face, they're also showing Ishin's face. And Ishin's face isn't changing. So it is clear that he's not struggling with this decision. He's not, he doesn't even hesitate. He says, all right, time to do it. Let's do it. And so it's one of those things that I really think about, that love that Ishin showed to Misaki. And Misaki is a Quincy and a random stranger, a high school student, a person he doesn't even really know, but Misaki saved his life. And so, so he owed it to her, but he gave up, it might not necessarily be something that considered, of equal value. Like, he gave up everything. Like, he gave up his Soul Reaper powers. He gave up being able to live in the Soul Society. I mean, he basically had to connect himself to Misaki and give up any future other relationships because he needed to be with her. Now, granted, it turns out that Ishin ends up falling in love with Misaki. And the way he describes her is just absolutely beautiful. So I would highly recommend reading either the manga chapters for this episode or just watching this episode and seeing him fall in love with Misaki during all of this. And it's just beautiful, despite the fact that it seems like one of the big things that led to this was a version of The Notebook, apparently. That's what I took it as. It seemed very much like the Notebook. Anywho, so what about us as Christians? What should we be doing with this lesson of Ishin giving up his life, his livelihood? Not his livelihood, because they do make money as captains, but it's not, he gave up his life as a Soul Reaper, as a captain, something that I know would have taken a lot of hard work and effort, but he gave it up to be with Misaki. So what should we be doing? Actually, this is just an example for me today. As I've shared, I'm a pastor, and I've got a lot of work that I do. Sermon prep, Bible study reading, administrative duties, and it's holiday season, so I've got family coming in. I got to be cleaning the house and things like that. And someone called in the office and says, like, hey, listen, I need help filling up my gas tank. And I was like, okay, I'll go. And, I didn't have to give up my time. I could have even sent someone else to go do it, but I did. And I want to do this, to point this out. I'm not doing this to point myself, pat myself on the back or anything, but, we have to lay down our lives, what we want to do, and go and do that to help others. Now, does this mean laying down our own lives? Sometimes, absolutely. There are soldiers and police officers, first responders, firefighters and paramedics. They're rushing in to dangerous situations for someone else. Like, they know that this could be the last time they go out. Yeah, they do it anyways. And so we as Christians are called to do the same thing. We're called to give everything up, to lay down our life for our friends and for our faith in Christ. So we're supposed to give this all up so that God's glory can be shown. And that can be a tough thing to do. So I want to challenge you that this week, that as you do that, know that you're doing it for God's glory, but not your own. All right. So for this episode, how would I rate this episode? Well, as I said, this is once again a very story-driven episode. There's even less action in it than the previous one, but it moves the story forward by telling the history of how Ishin and Misaki came together, and that in fact Ichigo is a mixture of Soul Reaper, Quincy, and Hollow, and so that explains why Ichigo is in fact so powerful. So how would I rate this episode? Let's see. I think I'm gonna give it just it's a 3.5. It's a good episode, but it's not great. Once again, the animation still continues to be phenomenal. The voice acting is fantastic. The music is great, but it's still, it's still just a story episode. So you have to watch it to understand why things happen. Character moments, things like that. But ultimately, it's a 3.5. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing great with it either. So if you disagree with me on this episode's rating, or want to talk about more about what I talked about with John 15:13, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section of this video, or you can reach out to me on email at frickityfracktalkback@gmail.com, or you can reach out to me on Twitter at frickityf, or at frickityfrack on Instagram and Facebook. So please rate, review, and subscribe. Remember that I love you, most importantly that God loves you, and go release your Bankai.